My mother-in-law's wineglass froze halfway to her mouth when I slid the business check across the dinner table. $30 million, she whispered, her eyes widening as she stared at the figure. My father-in-law's fork clattered against his plate. Just 10 minutes earlier, he'd been lecturing me about contributing to the household, while my husband James sat by in uncomfortable silence. "I thought you said she was between jobs," his sister Claire hissed, not quite quietly enough. I smiled, taking a small sip of my water. "Not between jobs," I corrected. "I just sold my company. That's the first installment payment." The way their expressions changed from condescension to shock was absolutely priceless. For 2 years, they'd dismissed my little online business as a hobby, something to keep me busy while James supported me with his real job at his family's manufacturing company. They never bothered to ask what Tech Health Solutions actually did, how many employees I had, or why I worked 16-hour days. They were too busy reminding me at every family gathering how generous James was to take care of me, despite my lack of contribution. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. That moment of perfect justice still brings a smile to my face whenever I remember it. The shocked expressions around that mahogany dining table, the sudden respectful silence, James finally sitting up straight with a look of vindication after years of defending me to his family. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the sweetness of that victory, you need to know how it all began. 5 years earlier, I was Sarah Mitchell, a woman who thought she was living her best life. I'd met James Parker during my final year of graduate school, where I was completing my master's in biomedical engineering. He was attending a tech conference where I was presenting my research on wearable health monitoring systems. James worked for his family's manufacturing company, Parker Industries, which primarily produced components for various consumer electronics. He was there scouting for innovative technologies they might incorporate. I still remember his thoughtful questions after my presentation, how he seemed genuinely interested in my ideas rather than just the commercial applications. We exchanged business cards, and he called the next day, ostensibly to discuss potential collaborations. Our coffee meeting quickly veered from professional to personal, and by the end, we'd spent 3 hours talking about everything from childhood dreams to favorite books. "Your mind works differently than anyone I've ever met," he told me that day. "You see connections others miss." What I didn't realize then was how those connections would eventually build my future, and how his family would completely fail to see my value. James and I had a whirlwind romance. Within 8 months, we were engaged, and 6 months after that, married in a ceremony that his mother, Helen, orchestrated down to the last detail. I was too in love and too focused on my research to care much about wedding arrangements, which Helen took as confirmation of her suspicion that I wasn't good enough for her son. "Engineers aren't known for their social graces," I overheard her telling a friend at our rehearsal dinner. "But she seems nice enough, and James is smitten. We can teach her how to fit in with our circle." If I hadn't been so distracted by my excitement about both the wedding and my research breakthroughs, I might have recognized these early warning signs. But love has a way of blurring red flags into rose-colored optimism. After the wedding, we moved into a beautiful home in Brookfield, an upscale suburb of Madison, Wisconsin. The house was a wedding gift from James's parents, something Helen never let me forget whenever she visited, which was often. The Parker family home was just 20 minutes away, and family dinners were a weekly obligation. Those dinners became a subtle battleground. Helen would ask James about the operations at Parker Industries, where he was being groomed to eventually take over from his father. The company manufactured specialized electronic components and had been steadily profitable for decades, if not particularly innovative. When the conversation turned to me, Helen would smile tightly and ask, "And how's your little research project going, dear?" No matter how I explained my work developing advanced health monitoring systems, she would nod politely before turning to more important topics, like the charity gala she was organizing or Claire's children's private school achievements. Meanwhile, I continued my research, initially as part of a university lab, and then independently as my ideas took shape beyond the scope of academic research. James was supportive, converting our third bedroom into a home office art lab space for me and encouraging me to pursue my vision of creating affordable, continuous health monitoring for chronic conditions. "You're going to change lives with this," he would say, reviewing my prototypes. "I just wish my family could see what I see in you." Unlike his warm encouragement, his family's dismissal of my work stung. At a Christmas gathering during our first year of marriage, his father William asked when I planned to settle down and start a family instead of playing with gadgets. When James defended me, William clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Son, it's admirable that you support your wife's hobbies, but let's be practical about priorities." This dynamic continued as I transitioned from research to founding my own company. With my patents secured and promising early test results, I launched Tech Health Solutions with a small business loan and my savings from my previous research stipends. James offered to invest some of his trust fund, but I refused. "I need to do this myself," I told him. "I need to know I built this on my own merits." He respected my decision, though he didn't fully understand it. Having grown up with family wealth and connections, the concept of proving oneself without any advantages was foreign to him. Still, he supported me emotionally, celebrating small victories and providing comfort during setbacks. The early days of the business were grueling. I worked from our home office, initially as the only employee, developing prototypes during the day and handling business logistics at night. I hired 2 former lab colleagues as consultants, paying them with promises of future equity until we secured our first round of funding from a small venture capital firm that specialized in medical technology. That first $500,000 investment allowed me to rent a small office space in Madison's emerging tech district and hire 5 full-time employees, 3 engineers, a regulatory specialist, and a business development manager. We focused on creating a wearable device that could continuously monitor glucose levels, blood pressure, and heart rhythm patterns, sending alerts to both users and their healthcare providers when concerning patterns emerged. This could revolutionize chronic disease management, my business development manager told me after our first successful prototype demonstration. "You've created something that could save thousands of lives." But while my professional life was taking off, the strain at home was intensifying. James's family couldn't understand why I was still playing entrepreneur when I could be focusing on supporting James's career and starting a family. Helen would make pointed comments about women trying to have it all and ending up with nothing. "Sarah's on the verge of something important," James would defend me. "Her company is gaining traction." "Of course it is, dear," Helen would reply patronizingly. "But is it really appropriate for your wife to be working these long hours? What will people think?" The implications were clear. In their eyes, James was indulging me, and my work was an embarrassing hobby rather than a serious endeavor. The fact that I often came to family events directly from the office, sometimes still dressed in casual work clothes rather than the designer outfits Claire and Helen wore, only reinforced their perception. This tension came to a head 2 years into our marriage, just as Tech Health was preparing to submit our device for FDA review. We were at the regular Sunday dinner at the Parker family home when William raised the subject of James's future at Parker Industries. "We're expanding the executive team," he announced. "James, I want you to head up the new division we're creating. It's time you took on more leadership." "That's wonderful news," Helen beamed. "And perfect timing, too. Perhaps now Sarah can wind down her little project and focus on supporting you properly." The table fell silent. James looked at me uncertainly, clearly torn between excitement about his promotion and concern about his mother's comment. My company is preparing for FDA submission, I said carefully. It's actually the most critical time for the business. Claire, James's sister, sighed dramatically. Sarah, be realistic. James is being offered an executive position in an established family company. Your startup thing is a gamble at best. Isn't it time to be practical? Tech health isn't a gamble, I countered, trying to keep my voice even. We've developed a potentially life-saving technology with strong preliminary results and secured significant funding. This isn't a hobby. William set down his fork with a decisive click against fine china. Young lady, I've been in business for 40 years. Do you know what percentage of startups fail? Over 90%. James needs a wife who will support his career, not chase pipe dreams. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I looked at James, expecting him to defend me as he usually did. Instead, he studied his plate, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. His silence hurt more than his family's dismissal. I think I should head home, I said quietly, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten meal. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Of course you do, Helen muttered. James followed me to the car, apologizing profusely. They don't understand, he said. They're from a different generation, a different mindset. It's not their lack of understanding that hurts, James. It's that you sat there silently while they dismissed everything I'm working for. The drive home was tense, filled with James's explanations and my growing realization that while he supported me in private, he couldn't seem to stand up to his family on my behalf. This pattern repeated itself over the following months as tech health continued to grow and my presence at family events became increasingly sporadic due to work demands. What the Parkers didn't know, because they never asked, was that Tech Health Solutions had secured a second round of funding, this time for $3 million from a major healthcare investment group. We'd expanded to 20 employees and moved to a larger office space. Our initial FDA submission had received promising feedback, and we were addressing their questions with additional clinical data. Meanwhile, James had taken the executive position at Parker Industries, throwing himself into the role with enthusiasm. He was good at his job, personable, intelligent, and insightful about market trends. But the demands of both our careers meant we were seeing less of each other, often passing like ships in the night, exchanging quick updates before falling into exhausted sleep. I miss you, he told me one rare evening when we were both home for dinner. I'm proud of what you're building, but I miss having time together. I miss you too, I admitted. But we're both working toward important goals. This is temporary. He nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. My parents keep asking when we're going to start a family. Mom makes these comments about the biological clock ticking. James, you know I want children eventually. But right now, launching this company successfully has to be my focus. We've talked about this. I know. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. It's just hard to balance everything. The expectations. That Christmas, during the annual Parker family celebration, Helen cornered me by the dessert table. She'd had several glasses of wine, and her usual veneer of politeness had thinned considerably. You know, Sarah, she said in a low voice, when James married you, we were concerned. You weren't from our social circle, but you seemed intelligent, and we thought you'd make him happy. Now he works all day and comes home to an empty house because you're playing businesswoman. Is that fair to him? I set down my plate carefully, aware of the other family members pretending not to listen. Nearby. Helen, I respect that you care about James's happiness. So do I. But my company isn't a game, and James supports my work. Of course he does. He's too kind to tell you how he really feels. She sipped her wine. A man needs a supportive wife, especially when he's building his career, not competition. I'm not competing with James. Our work is in completely different sectors. Oh, then why did you refuse to let him invest in your little company? Too proud to take Parker money? Or afraid to admit you married into it for exactly that reason? The accusation stunned me into momentary silence. That's an incredibly hurtful suggestion, I finally managed. Is it? Then explain why you're so determined to keep your finances separate from his. Most wives would be grateful for the security James provides. Before I could respond, James appeared at my side, finally sensing the tension. Everything okay here? He asked, looking between us. Just girl talk, Helen said smoothly, patting his cheek. About family priorities. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying Helen's insinuation that I was somehow using James while simultaneously not taking enough advantage of his family's wealth, a contradiction that perfectly captured their confused assessment of my motives. More disturbing was the realization that James might have expressed private doubts to his family that he hadn't shared with me. The next morning, I raised the issue directly. James, are you telling your family you're unhappy about my work hours? About our decision to delay having children? He looked genuinely surprised. No, of course not. Why would you think that? Something your mother said. She made it sound like you've been complaining to them. He sighed heavily. I don't complain. About you, but they ask a lot of questions, and sometimes I admit things are challenging with both of us so busy. Challenging isn't the same as wrong, I pointed out. Every couple navigates careers and timing. Your family makes it sound like I'm selfish for having ambitions. They just don't understand your world, he said. They measure success differently. But do you understand, James? Do you really support what I'm building? Or are you just tolerating it until I come to my senses, as your father likes to say? James took my hands in his. I believe in you. I've seen how brilliant you are, how dedicated. I'm proud of what you're accomplishing. Do I miss having more time with you? Yes. Do I sometimes wish timing was different so we could start our family? Also, yes. But I would never want you to give up something this important. I wanted to believe him completely, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Were his supportive words in private enough if he couldn't defend me to his family? Was our marriage strong enough to withstand these opposing pressures? As the new year began, Tech Health Solutions reached a critical milestone. Our device received conditional FDA approval pending final clinical trials. This achievement attracted attention from several larger medical technology companies, including Medicorp, a leader in the health monitoring space. Their initial communication seemed like a standard industry congratulations until their CEO requested a private meeting. We've been watching your development with interest, Richard Torres told me over lunch. Your technology fills a gap in our product line. We'd like to discuss potential collaboration. What kind of collaboration? I asked. Cautiously. An acquisition, potentially. Your patents, your team, and your vision integrated into our global platform. The suggestion was both flattering and terrifying. I'd built Tech Health from nothing, pouring my heart and soul into its development. The idea of surrendering control to a corporate giant felt like giving away a part of myself. Yet the potential to see our technology scaled globally, helping millions rather than thousands, was compelling. I'd need to discuss this with my team and advisors, I told him. This isn't a decision I could make alone. Of course. But I want you to know we value what you've built. The preliminary figure we're considering is in the $25 to $30 million range. The number took my breath away. While I hadn't founded Tech Health, for financial gain, such a sum would validate all the long hours, all the sacrifices, all the moments of doubt. When I returned to the office, I closed my door and allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Then I called our company attorney and asked her to review our options. I didn't tell James immediately, partly because I wanted more information before making any decisions, but also because a small, wounded part of me wanted to savor this validation privately before subjecting it to his family's inevitable dismissal. Over the next 2 months, negotiations with Medicorp intensified. Their final offer came in at $30 million with the condition that I stay on for 2 years to oversee integration and product development. My team would be retained, our Madison office would become Medicorp's Midwest Innovation Hub, and our technology would be fast-tracked for global distribution. The night after signing the preliminary agreement, I finally told James. $30 million, he repeated, stunned. They're offering $30 million for tech health? Yes, I confirmed, unable to keep the pride from my voice. Plus employment contracts for the entire team and guaranteed investment in expanding the technology's applications. He lifted me off my feet in a spinning hug. This is incredible. I knew you were building something special, but this is beyond anything I imagined. We need to celebrate. His genuine excitement touched me deeply. Whatever doubts his family had instilled about his support vanished in that moment of shared joy. There's a condition, I said when he set me down. I'll need to stay with Medicorp for at least 2 years, possibly longer. The work hours won't change much, at least initially. That's fine, he said immediately. You've earned this recognition. We'll make it work. Then he paused, a slow smile spreading across his face. You know what this means, right? Sunday dinner at my parents' is going to be very interesting. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but the realization sent a nervous thrill through me. After years of condescension and dismissal, I would be walking into the Parker home with undeniable proof of my success. Maybe we shouldn't say anything, I suggested. Keep things professional. James shook his head. No way. I've watched them underestimate you for years. I've tried to defend you, but they never listen. Now they'll have to face the truth. You've built something extraordinary completely on your own terms. I recognized the guilt in his expression. Despite his private support, he knew he'd sometimes failed to stand up to his family strongly enough. This would be his vindication as much as mine. Okay, I agreed. But let's not make a big announcement. Let it come up naturally in conversation. James laughed. Trust me, my father asks about your hobby business within 10 minutes of every dinner. The opportunity will present itself. That Sunday, we arrived at the Parker family home as usual. Claire and her husband were already there, their 2 children playing in the formal living room despite Helen's frequent warnings about the antique furniture. William was nursing his customary pre-dinner scotch, and Helen was directing the housekeeper about final dinner preparations. James, Sarah, you're late, Helen noted disapprovingly. We were about to start without you. Sorry, Mom. Last-minute work call, James said smoothly, kissing her cheek. On a Sunday? Parker Industries is really keeping you busy, she said proudly. William mentioned the Tokyo contract is almost finalized. It is, James confirmed. The team's done great work. We moved to the dining room, where the conversation continued to focus on Parker Industries' recent successes. William detailed their expansion plans while Helen nodded approvingly, occasionally directing pointed glances my way, as if to emphasize what real business achievement looked like. When the main course was served, William finally turned his attention to me. And Sarah, are you still tinkering with that health gadget? James tells me you've been even busier than usual. The dismissive phrasing was so familiar, it almost made me smile. Yes, tech health has had some significant developments recently. Oh, William said with minimal interest. Finally giving up on the startup dream and looking for a real position somewhere? Claire snickered. I saw a posting for a research assistant at the university. Might be a good fit if you're ready for stability. Actually, James interjected, unable to contain himself any longer. Sarah's company has been acquired by Medicorp. She's going to be heading their new Midwest division. A brief silence fell over the table. Acquired? William repeated. You mean you sold your patents to them? No, the entire company, I clarified. The technology, the team, everything. Helen set down her wine glass. Well, that's unexpected. I imagine it must be a relief to have found a safe landing like that. Startups are so precarious. Her tone suggested I'd been lucky rather than successful, rescued rather than rewarded. Before I could respond, Claire spoke up. So what does that mean exactly? You'll be working for this Medicorp now. As what, a consultant? As Regional Director of Innovation, I said. Overseeing the integration of our technology and the development of next-generation products. That sounds impressive, William said, in a tone that suggested the opposite. I hope it comes with appropriate compensation for all those nights and weekends you've put in. It was the perfect opening. James squeezed my hand under the table, a silent encouragement. The compensation package is substantial, I said carefully, including the acquisition payment. Which is, William prompted, always direct about money matters within the family. I met his gaze steadily. $30 million with the first installment deposited yesterday. I reached into my bag and retrieved the bank statement I'd brought, sliding it across the table. It wasn't subtle, but after years of diminishment, I wanted irrefutable evidence. My mother-in-law's wine glass froze halfway to her mouth as she stared at the figure. My father-in-law's fork clattered against his plate. $30 million, Helen whispered, her eyes wide. I thought you said she was between jobs. Claire hissed to her father, not quite quietly enough. Not between jobs, I corrected, taking a small sip of my water. I just sold my company. That's the first installment payment. William cleared his throat, clearly struggling to reconcile this information with his long-held perception of my work. Well, this is quite surprising. Congratulations are in order, it seems. Indeed, Helen managed, her voice strained. How resourceful of you. The backhanded compliment might have bothered me once, but now it simply amused me. James, however, wasn't satisfied. Mom, Dad, for years you've dismissed Sarah's work as a hobby. You've made her feel unwelcome because she prioritized building her company. You've questioned her commitment to me, to this family. I think a genuine apology is in order. William flushed darkly. Now, see here. We were only concerned about your happiness. My happiness? James interrupted. Or your idea of what my life should look like. Sarah has created something extraordinary that will help millions of people manage chronic health conditions. She's done it through brilliance and persistence, without any advantages or family connections. If anything, I should apologize to her for not defending her work more strongly to you. The table fell silent again, the tension palpable. Finally, Helen spoke, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Perhaps we have been traditional in our expectations, she conceded. We come from a different world, where certain paths were clearly defined. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was the closest thing to humility I'd ever seen from her. Claire, less constrained by propriety than her parents, was more direct. So you're actually rich now? Like really rich? On your own? I couldn't help but laugh at her bluntness. The money isn't why I built the company. It was always about creating technology that could improve people's lives. But yes, the acquisition has significant financial benefits. More than significant, James added proudly. Sarah's now the most financially successful person at this table, by quite a margin. William's eyebrows shot up. Surely not more than Parker Industries. Different scale entirely, Dad, James confirmed. Your annual profits are impressive, but they're not $30 million in a single transaction. Plus, Sarah retains equity in Medicorp moving forward. I hadn't wanted this to become a competitive comparison, But there was something deeply satisfying about watching the realization dawn across their faces. After years of being treated as an inconvenient appendage to James, I was suddenly being reassessed as a power player in my own right. As the dinner progressed, the dynamic had shifted visibly. William began asking detailed questions about Medicorp's market position and growth strategy. Helen inquired about what neighborhood we might consider moving to, now that we could upgrade our living situation. Claire's husband wanted to know if I had investment tips. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who had dismissed my work as a distraction were now treating me as a financial authority. Their respect, suddenly offered after being withheld for so long, felt hollow. Yet, watching James beam with pride as he detailed the technical innovations that had made tech health so valuable gave me genuine joy. At least one Parker had believed in me all along. Later that night, as we drove home, James reached over and squeezed my hand. That was even better than I imagined. Did you see my father's face when he realized the scale of what you've accomplished? It was satisfying, I admitted, but also sad in a way. 4 years of work, and what finally earned their respect was a dollar figure. That's just their language, James said. They measure worth in very specific ways. It doesn't diminish what you've built or why you built it. He was right, of course. The validation that truly mattered wasn't the shocked expressions around that dining table, but the lives our technology would improve. The acquisition wasn't an endpoint, but a beginning. A platform to scale our solutions globally. So what now? James asked as we pulled into our driveway. Regional Director of Innovation by day, secret millionaire by night? I laughed. Nothing changes immediately. I still have the same work to complete, the same team to lead. The scale is different, but the purpose remains. And us? He asked more seriously. With this financial freedom, does it change your thinking? About family timing? It was a fair question. Much of our delay in starting a family had been about the demands of building tech health. With the company established and our financial future secure, those practical concerns were eliminated. I think we're entering a new chapter, I said carefully. One with different possibilities. I'll still be working intensely for at least the next 2 years, but there's more flexibility now, more resources to create the life we both want. James smiled. I like the sound of that. A new chapter on our own terms. As we entered our home, the home his parents had given us, but that now felt differently ours given my new financial independence, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From the graduate student with promising research to the entrepreneur who had just sold her company for $30 million, I had transformed not just my circumstances, but my sense of self. The Parker family would eventually adjust to this new reality, recalibrating their assessment of me and perhaps even genuinely respecting my achievements. But I no longer needed their approval or validation. I had proven my value not just to them, but more importantly, to myself. The check sitting in my bank account was satisfying evidence of success, but the real victory was in the journey itself, the late nights, the problem-solving, the team I'd built, and the technology that would help countless patients. That was worth more than $30 million. That was priceless. The morning after the dinner revelation, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. News travels fast in wealthy circles, and the Parker family network was buzzing with the unexpected development that James's hobby-obsessed wife had suddenly become a multi-millionaire entrepreneur. Most of the messages were from extended family members and social acquaintances who had previously treated me with polite dismissal at Parker gatherings. Now they were suddenly interested in catching up and hearing about my exciting news. I set my phone aside without responding and stretched luxuriously in bed. James had already left for an early meeting at Parker Industries, but he'd set a fresh cup of coffee on my nightstand with a note. To my brilliant, successful wife, who always knew what she was worth even when others didn't. I'm so proud of you. The simple gesture brought tears to my eyes. Despite his family's influence and occasional failures to defend me properly, James had been my constant supporter in private. He believed in my vision when everyone else saw a distraction. The acquisition validated not just my work, but his faith in me. I sipped my coffee and contemplated the day ahead. In 3 hours, I had my first official meeting with the Medicorp integration team. I'd need to project confidence and clear vision as I transitioned from startup founder to corporate executive. This was uncharted territory. I'd built Tech Health from nothing, but leading within an established corporate structure would require different skills. As I showered and dressed, selecting a tailored navy suit that projected professionalism without trying too hard, I reflected on how surreal the situation felt. Just 4 years ago, I was a graduate student with promising research, but no clear path to implementation. Now I was $30 million richer and responsible for technology that could transform chronic disease management globally. My phone rang again as I was applying mascara. This time it was Claire, James's sister. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered, "Sarah." Her voice was uncharacteristically warm. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." "I had my phone on silent," I replied neutrally. "What can I do for you, Claire?" "Well, I just wanted to apologize for yesterday, and honestly, for the past few years, we clearly misjudged what you were building." The apology sounded sincere, if transparently motivated by my new financial status. "I appreciate that," I said, not making it too easy for her. "I was wondering if we could have lunch sometime this week. I'd love to hear more about your company and how you built it. It's actually inspiring, you know? As a woman in this family, it's always been about marrying well or supporting the men's careers." That caught me off guard. Claire had always seemed the perfect Parker daughter, embracing the traditional role her parents valued, focusing on charity work and raising her children while her husband pursued his law career. Had there been ambitions beneath that carefully cultivated surface? "That would be nice," I said, softening slightly. "But this week is packed with Medicorp transition meetings. Maybe next week?" "Of course. Whenever works for you. Just let me know." She paused. "And Sarah?" "Mom and Dad are still processing everything, but they really are impressed, even if they don't know how to show it properly." After we hung up, I finished getting ready while contemplating this olive branch. Was it genuine interest or simply the Parker family's instinct to align themselves with success in any form? Either way, it represented a seismic shift in our dynamic, one I was still learning to navigate. The drive to my soon-to-be former office gave me time to center myself. Tech Health occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated warehouse in Madison's emerging tech district. I'd chosen the space for its character: exposed brick walls, enormous windows, open layout that encouraged collaboration. Soon, it would become Medicorp's Midwest Innovation Hub, with expanded staff and resources, but for now, it was still the home we'd built from scratch. My team was waiting in our conference room, 15 brilliant minds who had taken a chance on a startup with an ambitious vision. Some had left secure positions at established companies. Others were fresh graduates who had chosen Tech Health over better-paying corporate offers. All had contributed to building something remarkable. "The woman of the hour!" Marcus, my lead engineer, called out as I entered. The team broke into applause, catching me by surprise. "Thank you," I said, feeling suddenly emotional. "But this success belongs to all of us. Every person in this room made Tech Health what it is." "Yeah, but you had the vision," Priya, our regulatory specialist, countered. "And you convinced all of us to believe in it too. 30 million doesn't happen by accident." Speaking of which, Raj, our business development lead, jumped in. "Rumor has it your in-laws nearly collapsed when they found out about the acquisition. Please tell me that's true." The team knew something of my struggles with the Parker family. I'd been careful never to complain extensively about my personal life at work, but certain frustrations had occasionally surfaced during late nights or celebration dinners. Let's just say it was an educational experience for everyone involved, I replied diplomatically, which elicited knowing laughter. The mood shifted as I outlined what would happen next. Medicorp's integration team would arrive at 11. They'd present their transition plan, and we'd begin the process of becoming part of their corporate structure. I emphasized the positives: increased resources, global distribution potential, job security with competitive corporate benefits, but I could see the uncertainty in some faces. What about the culture we've built here? Zoe, one of our newest engineers, asked. Medicorp is huge. Will we just become anonymous cogs in their machine? It was a valid concern, and one I shared. That's exactly why I negotiated to remain as regional director, I explained. My primary responsibility is ensuring our team and our vision remain intact within the larger corporation. This office will operate with significant autonomy. And if they don't honor that, Marcus pressed, then I walk after the 2-year contract, taking my expertise and connections with me, I said frankly. And I've made sure everyone in this room has strong protection in their transition contracts. No one can be terminated without cause for at least 18 months. This reassurance seemed to settle some nerves, and we spent the remaining time before Medicorp's arrival reviewing our current projects and preparing questions. As 11 approached, I felt a familiar fluttering in my stomach, the same nervous anticipation I'd experienced before my thesis defense, before launching Tech Health, before telling James about the acquisition offer. Richard Torres, Medicorp's CEO, led the integration team personally, a gesture that underscored the importance they placed on this acquisition. He was accompanied by their chief technology officer, head of HR, and 3 other executives whose specific roles would become clear during the presentation. Sarah, Richard greeted me warmly, shaking my hand. Excited to make this official. Your team looks ready for action. We are, I confirmed. Everyone's eager to understand how we'll fit into the Medicorp ecosystem. The presentation was polished and comprehensive, outlining a 6-month transition period during which Tech Health would gradually integrate into Medicorp's systems while maintaining our current operations. Our technology would be fast-tracked for international distribution through their established channels, and our team would form the core of a new innovation division focused on wearable health monitoring across multiple conditions. We're not looking to absorb and dissolve, Richard emphasized. We're looking to amplify what you've built. Your team has achieved in 4 years what would have taken a decade in our corporate structure. That agility and innovative spirit is precisely what we want to preserve. The transition meeting stretched into a working lunch and then into afternoon breakout sessions where Medicorp specialists met with their Tech Health counterparts to begin detailed planning. By 5 o'clock, when the Medicorp team finally departed, I was mentally exhausted but cautiously optimistic. The day had gone as well as could be expected, with my team gradually warming to the possibilities the acquisition presented. As I packed up to leave, Marcus knocked on my office door. Got a minute? Of course. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat down, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Marcus had been my first hire, joining Tech Health when it was just me working from my home office. A brilliant engineer with a dry wit, he'd been instrumental in solving the power consumption issues that had initially limited our device's functionality. I wanted to say this privately, he began. This acquisition is life-changing for all of us, but especially for you. You deserve every penny of that $30 million and more. Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot coming from you. But, he paused, weighing his words. I'm worried about what happens when the shine wears off. When Medicorp starts exerting more control than they're promising now. When quarterly profit pressures override the patient-first approach we've always taken. It was a concern I'd wrestled with myself during negotiations. That's why I insisted on maintaining directorial control of this division, I assured him. and why I made sure our core patents have specific usage restrictions. I know, and if anyone can navigate corporate politics while maintaining integrity, it's you. He smiled slightly. Just remember why we built this in the first place, not for exits or acquisitions, but because your grandmother couldn't monitor her heart, condition effectively, and nearly died from a preventable complication. The reminder hit home. My grandmother's struggle with inadequate monitoring technology had indeed been the catalyst for my research focus. Tech health had never been about financial success. It had been about solving a critical problem affecting millions of patients. I won't forget, I promised. That mission remains unchanged, regardless of who signs our paychecks. After Marcus left, I sat alone in my office, watching the sunset paint the brick walls gold. This space had been my second home for years, the site of breakthroughs and setbacks, late-night coding sessions, and impromptu celebrations. Soon it would transform, expanding and evolving as part of Medicorp. That evolution was necessary to achieve our larger goals, but I understood my team's ambivalence. Change, even positive change, rarely comes without loss. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Dinner reservation at Osteria at 7, Champagne, is mandatory. The celebratory dinner was exactly what I needed after the emotional intensity of the day. James was waiting at the restaurant when I arrived, looking handsome in a charcoal suit he'd clearly changed into after work. He stood, as I approached the table, kissing me with genuine warmth before pulling out my chair. "To my extraordinary wife," he toasted once champagne was poured, "the most brilliant person I know." "To new beginnings," I countered, clinking my glass against his. "How was your day? Any fallout from last night's revelation?" James chuckled. "You could say that. Dad called an emergency breakfast meeting to discuss the changing dynamics of modern business. On translation, he wanted to know exactly how you built a $30 million company right under his nose. And what did you tell him? The truth, that you identified a critical need in healthcare monitoring that no one else was addressing. Effectively, that you developed proprietary technology that solves that need elegantly, that you built a brilliant team and secured the necessary funding and regulatory approvals without leveraging any Parker connections." He grinned. That last part particularly bothered him. "Because it challenges his worldview," I observed. "In William's universe, significant success doesn't happen without the right connections and social capital." Exactly. He kept asking if there was some professor or mentor who had opened doors for you. The idea that you could achieve this purely, on merit, seems to genuinely baffle him. The realization was both amusing and sad. William Parker had built his company through a combination of hard work and social privilege. Connections from his exclusive prep school and Ivy League university had provided his initial clients and investors. The concept of building something substantial without that network was foreign to him. "How about your mother?" I asked. "Any reaction from her?" James's smile faded slightly. "She called to suggest we consider moving to Lakeshore Estates now that we can afford a proper home. Apparently, our perfectly lovely house isn't adequate for people of our new stature." "Of course she did," I sighed. "Some things never change." She also mentioned that the country club has openings for new members, and that now would be an excellent time to apply since certain committee members are impressed by your business success. The country club had been a sore point early in our marriage. Helen had been scandalized when I declined her offer to sponsor our membership, explaining that I preferred to spend my limited free time hiking or reading rather than networking on a golf course. It had been one of the first signs that I would never quite fit the Parker wife mold. "Are you interested in joining now?" James asked, studying my expression. "It would mean a lot to my mother." "Would it mean a lot to you?" I countered. He considered the question honestly. "Parts of it would be convenient. The tennis courts are excellent, and some business connections happen there that are harder to make elsewhere." but it's not a priority for me if you're still opposed. Let me think about it, I offered. Everything's changing so quickly. I don't want to make decisions just to please your family, but I also don't want to reject things out of principle that might actually benefit us. That's fair. He reached for my hand across the table. But whatever you decide, I hope you know I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. Not because of the money, but because you had a vision and you made it reality against significant obstacles. His sincerity warmed me. Whatever complications his family created, James himself had been my steadfast supporter. He might have occasionally failed to defend me adequately to his parents, but he had never doubted my capabilities or questioned my priorities. The rest of dinner passed pleasantly as we discussed the Medicorp transition and speculated about what changes might come with my new role. James suggested we consider buying a vacation property, somewhere we can escape to when work gets overwhelming. And I found myself open to the idea in a way I wouldn't have been before the acquisition. Financial security created possibilities I was only beginning to contemplate. We were sharing dessert when Claire called James's phone. He glanced at the screen and frowned slightly. My sister never calls this late unless something's wrong. He answered, putting the call on speaker. Claire, everything okay? Not really, she replied, her voice tight. I'm at the hospital with Dad. He had some kind of episode during dinner. Difficulty breathing, arm pain. Mom thinks it might have been a heart attack. James immediately sat straighter, all relaxation vanishing. Which hospital? We'll come right now. Madison Memorial. They're running tests, but it would be good if you could get here. Mom's pretty shaken up. We're on our way, he assured her, already signaling for the check. The drive to the hospital was tense, James gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles while I navigated, finding the quickest route through evening traffic. Neither of us stated the obvious connection, that William's episode had occurred the day after learning about our financial windfall, a shock to his system both literally and figuratively. Madison Memorial's emergency department was brightly lit and efficiently run, but still carried that distinctive hospital tension. Claire met us near the entrance, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled, eyes red-rimmed from crying. They're saying it was a minor heart attack, she reported, leading us through corridors toward the cardiac unit. They've done an ECG and blood tests, and they're scheduling an angiogram for tomorrow morning. He's stable now, but they're keeping him overnight for observation. Helen was sitting ramrod straight in an uncomfortable-looking chair outside William's room. Despite the late hour and stressful circumstances, she was immaculately dressed in tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater, her makeup flawless aside from slightly smudged mascara. The Parker family handled crisis with rigid composure, emotions carefully controlled, appearances maintained. James, she said, standing to embrace her son. Thank you for coming so quickly. Of course, Mom. How is he? Refusing to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation, she replied with a tight smile, insisting he'll be back at work tomorrow, despite the doctor's orders for rest and further testing. Helen's gaze shifted to me, and I braced for coldness or blame. Instead, she surprised me by extending her hand. Sarah, I appreciate you coming as well. Families should come together in these moments. It was the first time she had ever explicitly included me in family without qualification. The gesture, small as it was, felt significant. Can we see him? James asked. Briefly. The doctor wants him resting, but he's still awake and asking about work matters. Helen shook her head disapprovingly. Perhaps you can convince him to take this seriously. William Parker looked diminished against the white hospital sheets, monitoring wires disappearing beneath his hospital gown. His normally commanding presence was muted, his complexion ashen despite the nurse's assurances that his condition had stabilized. Seeing him this way, vulnerable, mortal, shifted something in my perception of him. Son, he greeted James, voice rougher than usual. Your mother is overreacting. Minor indigestion blown out of proportion. The doctors seem to think otherwise. Dad, James replied gently. They're talking about a minor heart attack. William waved a hand dismissively, then noticed me standing beside James. Sarah? Didn't expect to see you here. I was with James when Claire called. We came straight. Away? He studied me with an unreadable expression. Quite a day for the Parker family. First, your stunning announcement, now this. He gestured to the monitoring equipment. Not that there's any connection, of course. But his slight smile suggested he recognized the irony. The man who had dismissively asked about my little hobby business for years had learned of its $30 million valuation, only to find himself hospitalized within 24 hours. The doctors say you need rest, I said, opting for practical concern rather than addressing his implied connection. Is there anything we can bring you to make you more comfortable here? My laptop and the Tokyo contract files, he replied immediately. This delay is inconvenient, but I can review documents from here. Dad, James interjected, you need to take this seriously. Work can wait. Parker Industries doesn't stop because I have a minor health issue, William insisted. The Tokyo deal is too important to delay. I exchanged glances with James, recognizing the stubborn determination that had built Parker Industries from a modest manufacturing operation into a regional success. That same determination might now be putting William's health at further risk. What if I look at the Tokyo contracts? James suggested. I've been involved in the negotiations from the beginning. I can keep things moving forward while you focus on recovery. William hesitated, clearly reluctant to relinquish control, but aware of his limited options. You'd need to coordinate with Richardson in legal and Martinez in production. The terms on the exclusivity clause are still being finalized. I can handle it, James assured him. But only if you promise to follow the doctor's orders completely. After extracting this promise, we left William to rest, rejoining Helen and Claire in the waiting area. A new tension had entered our already complex family dynamic, William's health scare creating both genuine concern and a potential power shift within Parker Industries. If James stepped up to handle the Tokyo deal in his father's absence, it would accelerate his rise within the company hierarchy. I should get to the office early tomorrow, James said as we prepared to leave. The Tokyo team will be expecting updates, and I'll need to review the current contract status before making any calls. Helen nodded approvingly. Your father will be more likely to rest if he knows you're handling things competently. She turned to me with an evaluative look. Sarah, perhaps you could delay your Medicorp responsibilities for a day or two? James may need support at home while managing this additional workload. The request was partly practical, partly a test of my priorities now that our financial situation had changed. Would I still prioritize my career over supporting my husband's during a family crisis? My team is in the middle of critical transition planning, I said carefully. But I can certainly adjust my schedule to ensure everything at home is taken care of. I turned to James, and I'm happy to help review any contract language if that would be useful. Technical evaluation is my strength. James smiled gratefully. That would be incredibly helpful, actually. The Tokyo deal involves component specifications that I understand conceptually, but not as deeply as I should. Helen seemed satisfied with this compromise, and we departed after arranging to check in the following morning. The drive home was quieter than our trip to the hospital, both of us processing the evening's unexpected turn. Your father will be okay, I said finally, breaking the silence. The doctors sounded confident that they caught it early. I know, James sighed. But it's still a wake-up call. Dad's always seemed invincible, working 15-hour days, never taking proper vacations, powering through any illness. Maybe this will finally force him to reconsider his approach. And what about you? I asked gently. You've been adopting many of the same patterns since taking the executive position. He glanced at me sharply. I haven't been nearly as bad as Dad. Not yet, I acknowledged. But the tendency is there. The Tokyo deal has had you working weekends for a month. When was the last time we took a day off together? James fell silent, recognizing the truth in my observation. We had both been working intensely, me building tech health toward acquisition readiness, him proving himself in his executive role at Parker Industries. Our marriage had remained strong, but often operated in parallel rather than truly together. Maybe this is an opportunity for both of us, I suggested. With the Medicorp transition and your father's health situation, we could reassess our priorities. Find a better balance. What are you proposing? He asked, pulling into our driveway. I'm not sure exactly, I admitted, but suddenly having financial security changes the equation. Neither of us needs to work ourselves to exhaustion for financial stability anymore. We can make choices based on what truly matters to us. As we entered our home, the home that had been a gift from his parents but now felt different in the context of my new financial independence, I felt a subtle shift in our relationship dynamic. For years, despite my career success, there had been an unspoken imbalance created by the Parker family's wealth and influence. My financial dependence on James had been minimal in practice, but significant in perception, particularly to his family. Now that imbalance had been eliminated, we were true equals financially as well as intellectually. The question became, how would this new equality reshape our relationship, our interactions with his family, and our future plans? As we prepared for bed, both mentally exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day, James pulled me into a tight embrace. Thank you for coming to the hospital tonight, for being part of my family despite how difficult they've made that sometimes. They're part of who you are, I replied, resting my head against his chest. And despite our differences, I wouldn't want you to face something like this alone. Dad's heart attack is going to change things at Parker Industries, he said quietly. Even if he makes a full recovery, the board will insist on succession planning and risk mitigation. They've been pushing for me to take more leadership already. And how do you feel about that? He was silent for a long moment, contemplating. Conflicted. I've always expected to eventually run the company, but not like this. Not because of Dad's health failing. And now, with your company's acquisition and this new chapter for both of us, I'm not sure what the right path forward looks like. The vulnerability in his admission touched me deeply. For all the Parker family's emphasis on certainty and control, James was acknowledging genuine uncertainty about his professional future. It was a conversation we would need to continue in the coming days and weeks, as both our careers evolved in unexpected ways. That night, I dreamed of hospital corridors that transformed into Medicorp's corporate hallways, of William Parker and Richard Torres exchanging knowing glances over my head, of Claire whispering, "Teach me how you did it," while Helen rearranged place settings at an endless dinner table. The dream reflected the swirling changes in my waking life. New power dynamics, shifting relationships, evolving identities. When morning came, bringing with it the practical demands of both our professional responsibilities, one thing had become clear. The revelation of my company's acquisition had set in motion changes far beyond the financial. It had disrupted the established order of the Parker family, challenged long-held assumptions about success and capability, and created space for new possibilities in my relationship with James. The true test would come in the weeks ahead, as the initial shock faded and new patterns emerged. Would Helen's newfound respect for me survive beyond the crisis of William's health scare? Would Claire's sudden interest in my career path prove genuine or opportunistic? Would James successfully navigate his increased responsibilities at Parker Industries while supporting my transition to Medicorp? And perhaps most importantly, would I maintain the integrity of Tech Health's original mission within a corporate giant? Or would the very success I'd fought so hard to achieve ultimately Compromise the values that had driven me from the beginning? These questions would define the next chapter of our journey, a chapter fundamentally transformed by $30 million and a heart attack, both arriving within 24 hours to reshape everything we thought we knew about our future. 3 weeks after William's heart attack, life had settled into a new rhythm. The doctors had confirmed it was indeed a mild cardiac event, requiring lifestyle changes but no surgery. William had been discharged after 2 days in the hospital with strict instructions about diet, exercise, and stress management, instructions he followed with grudging compliance under Helen's watchful eye. The Parker family dynamic had shifted, in subtle but significant ways. James was now effectively running daily operations at Parker Industries, while William temporarily worked reduced hours, participating in key decisions remotely, but relinquishing direct oversight of ongoing projects. This acceleration of the anticipated succession plan created both opportunity and tension, James proving himself capable while William struggled with his diminished role. Meanwhile, my integration into Medicorp had progressed smoothly. Our Madison office had been rebranded with the corporate logo, new equipment had arrived, and additional staff were being interviewed to expand our team. My role as regional director came with considerable autonomy, but also new corporate responsibilities, weekly executive video conferences, detailed reporting requirements, and strategic planning sessions that sometimes pulled me away from the hands-on work I preferred. On a crisp autumn morning, I was reviewing candidate resumes for our expanded development team when my assistant notified me that Helen Parker was in the reception area asking to see me. The unexpected visit startled me. In 5 years of marriage to James, Helen had never once visited my workplace. "Send her in," I said, quickly clearing space on my desk and straightening my blazer. Helen entered with her characteristic poise, designer handbag tucked in the crook of her arm, cashmere wrap artfully draped over a silk blouse. Her gaze swept the office, taking in the exposed brick walls, the whiteboard covered in technical diagrams, the awards and patents framed on one wall. "What a unique space," she commented, which from Helen could be either compliment or criticism. "Thank you for stopping by," I said, gesturing to the visitor chair. "This is unexpected. Is everything okay with William?" She settled primly into the chair. "William is being stubborn about his recovery, but the doctors are pleased with his progress. That's not why I'm here." "Oh?" I remained standing, uncertain where this conversation might lead. "I wanted to see it for myself," she said, her gaze continuing to assess my office. "The place where you built $30 million of value. I've been trying to understand." The admission surprised me. Understand what exactly? How I could have been so wrong. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. I prided myself on recognizing potential, on understanding people's capabilities. Yet I completely misjudged you and what you were creating here. This frank acknowledgement was unprecedented from Helen, who typically maintained a veneer of infallibility. I sat down across from her, genuinely curious about this apparent introspection. "What did you think I was doing all those years?" "Honestly?" She met my eyes directly. "I thought you were avoiding the responsibilities of being a Parker wife. I saw your work as an elaborate excuse to postpone children, to escape the social obligations that come with James's position. I assumed your company was essentially a hobby you'd indulge until you accepted your actual role." The candid assessment stung despite its accuracy. Helen had indeed made her assumptions about my priorities abundantly clear over the years, just never so explicitly stated. "And now?" I prompted. "Now I'm trying to reconcile the Sarah I thought I knew with the woman who built something valuable. Enough for Medicorp to pay $30 million. Her expression softened slightly. "It's requiring some adjustment to my perspective." "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully, "though I wish you'd taken an interest in understanding my work sooner." "Perhaps I should have," she conceded. But you weren't what I expected for James. He'd always dated women who understood our world, the social responsibilities, the family legacy. You were different. Different doesn't mean wrong, I pointed out. No, it doesn't. She glanced at the framed patent certificates on my wall. William had a similar reaction when I met him, you know. His family had certain expectations for the woman he would marry. I wasn't from the right background, didn't attend the right schools. They assumed I was after his family's money. This revelation caught me by surprise. Helen had always presented herself as the perfect corporate wife, so aligned with the Parker family values that I'd assumed she came from the same privileged world. I didn't know that, I admitted. It's not something I discuss often, but William saw something in me beyond my background, an ability to navigate social situations, to build the connections a business family needs. A hint of pride entered her voice. I made myself indispensable to the Parker legacy in my own way. I began to understand. Helen had carved out her value within the Parker family structure through social capital, rather than business acumen. She'd measured my worth using the same yardstick, finding me lacking because I directed my energy elsewhere. We simply value different things, I suggested. Different contributions. Evidently, her gaze swept my office again. Though $30 million certainly clarifies the value of your particular contribution. There it was, the persistent Parker emphasis on financial metrics as the ultimate measure of worth. Even in this moment of attempted reconciliation, Helen couldn't help but quantify my achievement in dollars. The acquisition price wasn't my goal, I explained. It was creating technology that helps people manage chronic health conditions more effectively. The financial outcome was secondary. Helen's perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose slightly. A lovely sentiment, but you can't deny the validation that comes with such evaluation. It's concrete proof of achievement. Rather than argue philosophy with her, I decided to redirect. There's something specific you wanted to discuss today? I have a candidate interview scheduled soon. Actually, yes. She straightened, transitioning to what I recognized as her charitable planning demeanor. The autumn gala for the Madison Children's Hospital is 6 weeks away. I chair the organizing committee, as you know. Given your recent success, I thought, you might be interested in taking a more prominent role this year, perhaps as a major sponsor? And there it was, the actual purpose of her unexpected visit. Helen wasn't primarily here for reconciliation. She was here to leverage my new financial status for her social causes. The request wasn't unreasonable. The Children's Hospital did important work, but the transparent opportunism was pure Helen. What level of sponsorship did you have in mind? I asked neutrally. The platinum level is $50,000, she replied smoothly. It includes recognition in the program, a premium table for 10, and acknowledgement during the evening's presentation. Given your company's focus on health technology, it would be an appropriate alignment. The amount was substantial, but not excessive given my new circumstances. More importantly, children's healthcare aligned with Tech Health's mission. Still, I resented being approached as a checkbook rather than a person. I'd be happy to discuss sponsorship, I said, but through Medicorp's charitable foundation rather than personally. Corporate giving should be structured appropriately for tax and governance purposes. Helen looked momentarily disappointed that I hadn't simply written a personal check on the spot, but recovered quickly. Of course. How responsible of you. I can send the sponsorship materials to your assistant. Please do. I'll review them with our corporate giving team. She rose to leave, having accomplished her primary objective, but paused. One more thing, Sarah. William and I are hosting a dinner next Saturday for some of the hospital board members. James will be there, of course. I'd appreciate if you could make it a priority to attend as well. The phrasing wasn't lost on me. Not an invitation, but an expectation. with a subtle reminder that I had often missed such functions due to work commitments. "I'll check my calendar," I replied noncommittally. Helen's smile tightened. "These connections matter, Sarah, especially now that you're operating at a higher level professionally. The right relationships can be invaluable." After she left, I sat in my office contemplating this new version of Helen Parker. Still controlling, still status conscious, but now approaching me as a potential asset rather than a disappointment. It wasn't true acceptance, but it was a redefinition of my place in the Parker universe. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Mom just called. Said she visited your office? Everything okay?" I smiled at his concern and replied, "Fine. She wants $50K slid for the Children's Hospital Gala and my presence at some dinner next weekend." His response came quickly. "Ah, the Helen Parker special. Validation with strings attached. Sorry about that." "Not your fault," I texted back. "At least she's acknowledging my work exists now." "Progress," he replied with a laughing emoji. "Dinner tonight? I need to escape contract review hell." 6:30 at Marzano's? I have late calls until 6. "Perfect. Love you." "Love you too," I replied, setting my phone aside as my assistant announced the arrival of my first interview candidate. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, technical reviews, and integration planning. By the time I arrived at Marzano's, a cozy Italian restaurant we frequented when we wanted to escape Parker family scrutiny, James was already at our usual corner table, nursing a glass of wine. "Sorry I'm late," I said, kissing him quickly before sitting down. Video conference with Singapore ran long. "No worries. I ordered the calamari to start." He studied me across the table. "So my mother actually came to your office. That's unprecedented." "Definitely a first," I agreed, accepting the wine he poured for me. "She said she wanted to see where I built $30 million of value." James winced slightly. "Everything's always about the money with her." "Not just money, status. The Children's Hospital Gala is her social event of the season. Having newly wealthy sponsors elevates her position." "Are you going to do it?" he asked. I shrugged. "Probably. It's a good cause, and Medicorp encourages community involvement. I just don't appreciate being approached as an ATM." "Welcome to my world," James said with a wry smile. "Every conversation with my parents eventually circles back to what resources, financial or social, you can provide to advance the Parker agenda." The casual comment sparked a realization. "Is that how you felt all these years? Like your value to them was primarily what you could contribute to the family business and reputation?" He considered this thoughtfully. "Not consciously, but yes, I suppose so. There's always been an expectation that my individual choices should serve the larger Parker interests. It's suffocating sometimes." This was the most direct criticism I'd ever heard James express about his family dynamic. Typically, he defended their intentions while occasionally acknowledging their methods were flawed. "Is that why you've been so supportive of my independence?" I asked. "Because you never had that yourself?" "Maybe." He twirled his wine glass thoughtfully. "I admire how you've charted your own course without compromising. I wasn't strong enough to do that with my parents." "That's not about strength," I objected. "You had different priorities. Family legacy meant more to you than it does to me." Our conversation paused as the server delivered the calamari and took our dinner orders. Once we were alone again, James leaned forward with unusual intensity. "Dad's heart attack has made me reevaluate everything," he admitted. Watching him struggle with reduced involvement at Parker Industries, seeing how his identity was so wrapped up in his work that this health setback feels like an existential crisis. I don't want that to be me 30 years from now. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying maybe we've both been working toward goals without questioning whether they're actually what we want." He reached for my hand across the table. The Tokyo deal closes tomorrow. Dad's cardiologist has cleared him to return to part-time work starting next week. Maybe it's time we took a step back and asked ourselves what we really want, now that financial necessity isn't driving our choices. The suggestion caught me off guard. You're thinking about leaving Parker Industries? Not necessarily leaving, he clarified, but perhaps redefining my role, creating boundaries. Dad's heart attack has given me legitimate grounds to propose structural changes to the board. Like what? I asked, intrigued by this new, more assertive James. Like a clear succession plan with defined phases. Like modernizing our management structure so the company isn't so dependent on any single person. Like perhaps bringing in outside talent for some key positions rather than assuming Parkers must hold every leadership role. These proposals would have been unthinkable before William's health scare. Direct challenges to the family-centric business model that had defined Parker Industries for decades. How would your father react to these suggestions? I asked cautiously. Not well, initially, James acknowledged. But his doctors have been very clear about stress reduction. The board is worried about business continuity. The timing is right to propose changes that would have been rejected outright 6 months ago. I squeezed his hand supportively. I'm impressed. This is a significant shift in your approach. Your acquisition created a financial cushion that makes this possible, he pointed out. Without that security, challenging the status quo would feel much riskier. The realization that my success had emboldened James to advocate for his own needs within the family business was deeply satisfying. Money hadn't just changed my standing with the Parkers, it had subtly shifted the power dynamic between James and his parents, giving him leverage he hadn't previously possessed. So, what would these changes mean for us practically? I asked. For our day-to-day lives? More balance, hopefully. Maybe more time together. Possibly even. He hesitated briefly. Starting a family, if that's still something you want. Children had been a recurring point of tension with the Parker family, who viewed my prioritization of career over motherhood as evidence of selfishness rather than choice. James and I had agreed to revisit the question once tech health was established, but we hadn't discussed timing recently. I do want children eventually, I confirmed, but the Medicorp integration will demand intense focus for at least the next year. After that, maybe we could reconsider the timing. That sounds reasonable, he agreed. And it gives us time to implement changes at Parker Industries and see how they work before adding another major life change. As we continued dinner, discussing possibilities that would have seemed unthinkable just months earlier, I marveled at how thoroughly the acquisition had transformed our reality. Beyond the obvious financial impact, it had created space for James to reimagine his relationship with the family business and for us to plan our future from a position of equality and choice rather than obligation. The following Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunlight, trees beginning to show hints of color. I spent the morning reviewing Medicorp integration documents, then accompanied James to a local nursery to select plants for our backyard landscaping project. It was the kind of ordinary weekend activity we'd rarely made time for in recent years, both of us typically working through weekends on our respective professional demands. What about these hydrangeas? James suggested, pointing to a display of vibrant blue blooms. They'd look nice along the back fence. They need acidic soil to maintain that blue color, I noted. Our soil tends to be more alkaline. He raised an eyebrow. Since when are you an expert on soil chemistry and gardening? I'm not, I laughed. But my mother was a master gardener, remember? Some knowledge gets absorbed through childhood, osmosis. This casual exchange, discussing plants and soil conditions rather than business strategy or family obligations, felt refreshingly normal. The acquisition had relieved a certain pressure, allowing space for ordinary pleasures that had been crowded out by career ambitions and Parker family expectations. We returned home with the car loaded with hydrangeas and soil amendments to ensure they'd stay blue, ornamental grasses, and flowering perennials. James changed into worn jeans and a faded t-shirt to begin planting while I prepared for Helen's dinner party, which required a more formal appearance. "Sure you don't want me to skip this thing and help you with the garden?" I asked hopefully, watching him mark planting locations with small stakes. "Nice try," he chuckled. "But if I have to endure another medical charity dinner, so do you. Besides, I promised Mom we'd both be there." Apparently, several hospital board members specifically asked if you'd be attending. "My new money makes me interesting," I observed dryly. "Amazing how that works." "It's not just the money," James countered. "It's what you've accomplished. Healthcare technology experts are valuable connections for a children's hospital board." I couldn't argue with that logic, so I retreated upstairs to change into an appropriate outfit for the evening, a navy cocktail dress with subtle gold accessories that projected successful professionalism without ostentation. As I applied makeup, I contemplated my evolving strategy for Parker family functions. Now that they acknowledged my professional success, how should I position myself within their social sphere? Complete integration into Helen's world of charity galas and country club memberships held no appeal, but neither did continued isolation from James's family connections. Perhaps there was a middle path, selective engagement with the parts of Parker's social life that aligned with my values and interests, while maintaining boundaries around the rest. James showered and changed in record time, emerging in a tailored suit that perfectly complemented my outfit. "Ready to brave the Parker social gauntlet?" he asked, adjusting his tie. "As I'll ever be," I replied, gathering my clutch. "Just promise we won't stay past dessert. I have early calls with Europe tomorrow." "Deal," he agreed as we headed to the car. Though fair warning, Mom's been hinting about some exciting announcement tonight. No idea what that means, but it might complicate a quick exit. Helen and William's home was illuminated against the darkening sky, its grand colonial architecture emphasizing their position in Madison's social hierarchy. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway, and uniformed staff directed arriving guests through the front entrance, where Helen stood greeting people with practiced charm. "James, Sarah," she exclaimed as we approached, air kissing James's cheek before turning to me. "So glad you could join us. There are several people very eager to meet you." The subtle emphasis on very conveyed that my presence was not just appreciated but valuable to Helen's social objectives. William stood nearby, looking thinner than before his heart attack but impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that disguised his weight loss. His complexion had improved, though a certain weariness remained around his eyes. "Son," he greeted James with a firm handshake. "The Tokyo contracts arrived this morning. Excellent work." "Thanks, Dad. But maybe we could leave business until Monday? Doctor's orders, remember?" William waved this concern away, but obediently turned to me. "Sarah, understand you're settling in well at Medicorp. Richard Torres speaks highly of your transition leadership." The casual mention of Medicorp's CEO suggested William had been making inquiries about my professional progress, a level of interest he'd never before demonstrated. "The integration is proceeding smoothly," I confirmed. "Richard's support has been invaluable." Before we could continue this unexpectedly pleasant exchange, Helen intervened. "You must come meet Douglas Harrington. He chairs the hospital's technology committee and has been quite interested in discussing potential innovations for pediatric care monitoring." The subtle directive was clear. My value tonight was as a healthcare technology expert who could impress board members, not as a daughter-in-law making small talk. I allowed myself to be guided into the crowded living room, where Helen promptly introduced me to a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. "Dr. Harrington, this is my daughter-in-law, Sarah Parker, who recently sold her health monitoring technology company to Medicorp." "Sarah, Dr. Harrington oversees all technology implementation for Madison Children's." "A pleasure," he said, shaking my hand firmly. Helen mentioned your work in continuous monitoring systems. We've been exploring similar solutions for our pediatric cardiology department. And just like that, I found myself engaged in a substantive discussion about healthcare technology applications. The kind of conversation I genuinely enjoyed, rather than the superficial social chatter that typically dominated Parker gatherings. Dr. Harrington asked thoughtful questions about data integration, alert thresholds for pediatric patients, and battery life considerations for child-friendly devices. "We should arrange for you to tour our facility," he suggested as our conversation concluded. "Your expertise would be invaluable as we evaluate potential systems." "I'd be happy to," I replied sincerely, though I should note that my new role at Medicorp creates certain constraints around outside consulting. Of course, he nodded. "Perhaps framed as community outreach. Rather than formal consultation? Medicorp has been generous with the Children's Hospital in the past." As Dr. Harrington moved on to greet other guests, James appeared at my side with champagne flutes. "You made quite an impression there," he observed, handing me a glass. Mom's practically glowing with pride that her daughter-in-law is being courted by the technology committee chair. "He's actually knowledgeable and asked intelligent questions," I said, surprised by the quality of the interaction. "Not at all what I expected from your mother's charity circle." The hospital board includes serious healthcare professionals alongside the social climbers, James pointed out. Mom's genius is in managing both groups effectively. This perspective gave me new appreciation for Helen's social orchestration skills. Perhaps her talent for strategic connections wasn't so different from my own technical problem-solving, just applied to a different domain. As dinner was announced, James and I found ourselves seated at the main table with Helen, William, and several key board members. The placement, directly across from William rather than relegated to a secondary table as in previous functions, represented my elevated status in Helen's careful social calculus. Conversation flowed surprisingly comfortably, centered largely around healthcare innovations and the hospital's expansion plans rather than the society gossip that typically dominated Parker gatherings. I found myself genuinely engaged, offering insights about technology integration challenges and potential solutions that earned appreciative nods from the medical professionals present. As dessert was being served, Helen tapped her glass delicately, bringing the table's attention to William, who rose slightly unsteadily to address the gathering. "Thank you all for joining us tonight in support of Madison Children's Hospital," he began, his voice less commanding than before his health scare, but still carrying authority. "Recent events have given me a new appreciation for excellent medical care." Gentle laughter acknowledged this understatement. "Helen and I have been discussing how to make a meaningful contribution beyond our usual annual support. Tonight, we're pleased to announce a $5 million gift to establish the Parker Family Wing for Pediatric Cardiology at Madison Children's." Applause erupted around the table. The amount was substantial even by Parker standards, likely the largest single donation they had ever made. James looked as surprised as everyone else, suggesting this decision had been closely guarded. Additionally, William continued once the applause subsided. "Parker Industries will be establishing a technology integration fund of $2 million to ensure the new wing has state-of-the-art monitoring and treatment systems." His gaze shifted meaningfully to me. "We hope to draw on family expertise to guide these technology investments appropriately." The deliberate acknowledgement of my professional value in this context, at a formal announcement before the hospital's key supporters, was unprecedented. William was publicly signaling my inclusion in family expertise, a validation he had never before extended. As congratulations flowed and details of the donation were discussed, James leaned close to whisper, "Did you know about this?" I shook my head, completely surprised. $5 million is significant, even for them, he noted. "And that technology fund with the pointed reference to you. That's new territory." Indeed it was. The Parkers had never before suggested My professional knowledge might be valuable to their philanthropic efforts. This public inclusion represented a shift in how they positioned me within both family and community. No longer just James's work-obsessed wife, but a recognized expert whose contributions enhanced the Parker family standing. After dinner, as guests mingled over coffee and digestives, William approached me directly, another rarity at Parker functions, where he typically gravitated toward business connections and left family small talk to Helen. "Sarah," he began, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. "I hope you didn't mind my reference to your expertise regarding the technology fund." "Not at all," I assured him. "I'm happy to provide input if it would be helpful." He nodded, looking relieved. Good. The truth is, this cardiac episode has been illuminating. Makes a man reconsider priorities. He glanced toward Helen, who was deep in conversation with board members across the room. The donation was Helen's idea initially, but the technology component was mine. Seemed appropriate, given recent developments in the family. The oblique reference to my company's acquisition confirmed what I had suspected. William was acknowledging my professional success in the best way he knew how, by creating a role for my expertise within a Parker family initiative. "I appreciate the thoughtfulness," I said sincerely. "A pediatric cardiology wing will make a significant difference for many families." "Indeed." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "James tells me your monitoring systems could be adapted for pediatric patients with relatively modest modifications. Might be exactly what the new wing needs." This was the closest William had ever come to expressing direct interest in my work. The opportunity to implement Tech Health's monitoring systems in the Parker-funded hospital wing represented a different kind of validation than the acquisition, recognition of the technology's value beyond its market price. Medicorp has been developing pediatric applications, I confirmed. I'd be happy to connect the hospital team with our specialists in that area. William nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. We'll set up a proper meeting after the holidays." He hesitated, then added, "Your company's success was impressive, Sarah. Building something valuable from scratch takes a particular kind of vision. The Parker name may have opened some doors for James, but you created your opportunity entirely on merit. That deserves respect." The acknowledgement, delivered in William's characteristically formal manner, nonetheless represented a significant concession from a man who had dismissed my work as a hobby for years. Before I could respond, he excused himself to speak with another guest, leaving me to process this unexpected olive branch. Later that night, as James and I drove home, we dissected the evening's revelations, the major donation, William's acknowledgement of my professional value, Helen's strategic positioning of me with key hospital figures. "They're incorporating you into the Parker narrative," James observed, "finding a way to claim your success as somehow aligned with family priorities. It's their version of acceptance." "Still conditional, though," I noted, "based on what I can contribute to their projects and prestige." "True," he acknowledged, "but it's genuine progress from where we were 6 months ago. They're trying, in their way." As we pulled into our driveway, I considered the evening's subtle power shifts. The Parker family was indeed attempting to accommodate my new status, trying to reconcile their traditional values with the undeniable evidence of my professional achievement. Their approach remained transactional, valued for contributions rather than inherent worth, but represented evolution nonetheless. What remained to be seen was whether this evolution would persist beyond the initial shock of my financial success and William's health scare. Would the Parkers truly expand their definition of family contribution to include achievements like mine? Or would they revert to old patterns once the immediate catalysts faded? The answer would emerge in the months ahead, as we all navigated this new terrain of altered expectations, redistributed influence, and reconsidered priorities. One thing was certain: The simple dinner where they had once dismissed me as a gold digger had set in motion changes far beyond anything they could have anticipated, creating ripples that continued to transform our collective future in ways none of us had imagined. 6 months after the Parker family announced their donation to Madison Children's Hospital, spring arrived with a burst of renewal, both literal and metaphorical. The hydrangeas James and I had planted the previous autumn were showing the first signs of new growth, their leaves unfurling with promise. Similarly, our lives had blossomed in unexpected ways as we navigated our new reality. The hospital's Parker Family Wing for Pediatric Cardiology was moving from architectural plans to actual construction, with groundbreaking scheduled for next month. As William had suggested, Medicorp's pediatric monitoring systems, evolved from my original tech health designs, had been selected for implementation throughout the new wing. This professional connection to the Parker philanthropic legacy had created a bridge between my world and theirs, a space where my expertise was not just acknowledged, but actively valued. My role at Medicorp had evolved as well. After successfully leading the integration of Tech Health's team and technology, I'd been promoted to Vice President of Innovation for the entire Midwest region, overseeing development teams across 3 states. The expanded responsibility came with increased travel demands, but also greater influence over strategic direction, precisely the kind of role I'd envisioned when accepting the acquisition. Meanwhile, James had implemented significant changes at Parker Industries. Working with the board, he'd established a formal succession plan that transitioned William to chairman, while James assumed the CEO position. The new structure allowed William to remain involved in major decisions while reducing his day-to-day operational responsibilities, addressing both his health concerns and his reluctance to fully relinquish control. More surprisingly, James had championed modernization initiatives that previous generations of Parkers had resisted, hiring external executives for key positions rather than relying exclusively on family connections, implementing more transparent governance practices, and diversifying the company's manufacturing focus to include healthcare components, creating natural synergies with my work at Medicorp. These professional evolutions had been accompanied by personal ones. The financial security from my acquisition payout had allowed us to make lifestyle changes that better aligned with our values. We'd established a private charitable foundation, focused on STEM education for underserved communities. We'd purchased a lakeside cabin 2 hours north of Madison where we could escape for weekend retreats. And after careful consideration, we'd begun serious discussions about starting a family, a possibility that now felt like a choice rather than a concession. On a bright Saturday morning, I sat on our back patio reviewing quarterly projections while James prepared brunch in the kitchen. These leisurely weekends, with time for both personal pursuits and unstructured togetherness, were a luxury we'd rarely enjoyed before our dual career transformations. Mimosa delivery, James announced, emerging with 2 champagne flutes. Strictly medicinal, of course, vitamin C from the orange juice. I smiled and set aside my tablet. Just what the doctor ordered. Is the frittata almost ready? Another 10 minutes. He settled into the chair beside me, surveying our backyard, where spring flowers were beginning to emerge. The garden looks promising this year. Your hydrangeas are definitely thriving, I agreed. Turns out you have a hidden talent for horticulture. Speaking of hidden talents, he said, reaching for my hand, have you given any more thought to the board position Mom mentioned? The Children's Hospital nomination? Helen had recently approached me about joining the Madison Children's Hospital Board of Directors, suggesting that my healthcare technology expertise would be valuable as they implemented the new cardiac wing. The invitation represented yet another evolution in our relationship, Helen recognizing my professional value beyond the Parker family context. I'm still considering it, I replied. The mission aligns with my values, but I'd want to be sure I could contribute meaningfully given my Medicorp commitments. And frankly, I'm a bit wary of becoming too entangled in your mother's philanthropic empire. James chuckled. Fair concern. Though I think this is less about her empire building and more about genuine recognition of what you bring to the table. Dr. Harrington specifically requested you, according to Dad. That does make it more appealing, I admitted. I'm meeting with the current board chair next week to discuss expectations before making a decision. No pressure either way, James assured me, squeezing my hand. Though I must say, watching my mother gradually incorporate you into her carefully constructed social architecture has been fascinating to observe. Like watching a master chess player adapt to an unexpected move. The analogy was apt. Helen had indeed been recalibrating her approach to me over the past months, moving from dismissal to grudging acknowledgement to strategic inclusion. Our interactions remained somewhat formal, but had lost their previous undercurrent of disapproval. She now introduced me at functions with emphasis on my professional achievements, clearly proud to associate the Parker name with innovation and business success alongside their traditional manufacturing prestige. Your mother is nothing if not adaptable, I observed. She's found a way to transform my inconvenient independence into a family asset. That's her superpower, James agreed. Finding ways to incorporate potential disruptions into the Parker narrative. She did it with Dad's heart attack, reimagining it as an opportunity for thoughtful succession planning rather than a health crisis. She's doing it with your success, positioning it as complementary to family values rather than contradictory. Speaking of family, I began cautiously, I've been thinking more about our conversation from last month, about timing for potentially having a child. James's expression softened with interest. And my first-year Medicorp contract obligations are nearly complete. The integration is stable. My team is well established. Professionally speaking, this might be a reasonable window to consider starting our family. The words felt both thrilling and terrifying to speak aloud. For years, I'd prioritized my career development, viewing parenthood as a future consideration rather than an immediate possibility. The acquisition had shifted that calculus, creating space for life dimensions beyond professional achievement. Are you sure? James asked, his voice gentle. This needs to be right for you, not just a convenient timing window. I'm not sure anyone is ever completely sure about such a major life change, I admitted. But I do know that if we want children, there's never going to be a perfect moment, just better and worse ones. And this feels like a better one. He smiled, a mixture of joy and uncertainty that likely mirrored my own expression. So, are we officially trying? I think we are, I confirmed, feeling a flutter of anticipation. Though I'd prefer to keep this decision private for now, especially from your mother, who would immediately start redecorating our guest room as a nursery. Agreed, James laughed. This stays between us until there's actually news to share. The oven timer chimed, interrupting our momentous conversation with the mundane reality of breakfast preparation. As James went to retrieve the frittata, my phone rang with Helen's distinctive ringtone, a coincidence that momentarily made me wonder if she somehow possessed maternal ESP about our family planning discussion. Good morning, Helen, I answered, pushing away that irrational thought. Sarah, I hope I'm not interrupting your weekend, she began with unusual hesitation in her voice. I'm calling because William has had another episode. Nothing as serious as the heart attack, she quickly clarified, but concerning enough that his doctor has recommended immediate tests. My stomach tightened with concern. Despite our complicated history, I'd grown to respect William's resilience and his recent efforts to bridge the gap between us. What kind of episode? Is he in the hospital? Significant chest discomfort and shortness of breath during his morning walk. We're at Madison Memorial now. They're running an EKG and other. Das? Her voice maintained its usual composure, but I detected underlying worry. James isn't answering his phone. Is he with you? He's in the kitchen. I'll get him right away. I stood, moving toward the house. Do you want us to come to the hospital? A brief hesitation. Not necessary yet. The doctors are suggesting this may be a warning rather than an emergency. But James should know in case decisions need to be made. Of course, he'll call you right back. I found James in the kitchen, plating our breakfast with casual domesticity that contrasted sharply with the medical situation unfolding across town. His expression shifted immediately when he saw my face. What's wrong? Your father's at the hospital, another cardiac episode, though your mother says it's not as serious as the heart attack. She's trying to reach you. He immediately reached for his phone, finding several missed calls. I had it on silent for our conversation. Let me call her back. As James spoke with Helen, I arranged to have our breakfast packed for transport and gathered essential items, anticipating we would be heading to the hospital despite Helen's assurance that it wasn't necessary. James's side of the conversation confirmed this intuition. Short acknowledgments and questions about William's symptoms and the doctor's preliminary assessments. We need to go, he confirmed after ending the call. Dad's tests show some concerning changes since his last checkup. They're keeping him for observation and additional testing. I've already packed up breakfast, I told him. We can eat there if appropriate, or later if not. He looked momentarily surprised by my efficiency, then grateful. Thank you. Mom's trying to downplay this, but I can tell she's worried. Dad apparently tried to refuse going to the hospital at all, which suggests he's experiencing significant symptoms he can no longer ignore. The drive to Madison Memorial passed in tense silence. James focused on navigating while clearly processing concern for his father. William's first heart attack had been a shock that catalyzed significant changes in both Parker Industries and our family dynamic. This second cardiac event raised questions about whether those changes had been sufficient and what further adjustments might be necessary. Helen was waiting in the same cardiac unit waiting area where we'd found her 6 months earlier, though this time she appeared more composed, her initial panic tempered by familiarity with the process. She rose to embrace James when we arrived, then surprised me by including me in the gesture as well. Thank you both for coming, she said, resuming her seat. They're doing an angiogram now to assess for any blockages. Dr. Levine says this episode appears less severe than the previous one, but concerning given William's history. What exactly happened? James asked, sitting beside her. He was on his morning walk, which he's been faithful about since the heart attack, and experienced chest pressure and difficulty breathing. He actually called me from the walking path rather than pushing through it, which tells me he was genuinely frightened. By the time I picked him up, the acute symptoms had eased somewhat, but he agreed to come in for evaluation. The fact that William had called for help rather than dismissing his symptoms represented significant progress in his approach to his health. After his first heart attack, he had reluctantly acknowledged the need for lifestyle modifications, but often chafed against restrictions. This willingness to seek immediate medical attention suggested the seriousness of this episode had overcome his typical reluctance. Have you called Claire? James asked, referring to his sister. Helen nodded. She's arranging childcare and will join us later this morning. I've also notified Gregory at Parker Industries that William will be unavailable for at least the next few days. Gregory Martinez was the COO James had hired as part of the company's leadership diversification initiative, the first non-Parker to hold a C-suite position in the company's history. His presence meant business operations would continue smoothly. Despite William's absence, another significant change from 6 months prior when William's hospitalization had created operational challenges. Is there anything we can do while we wait? I asked, wanting to offer practical support. Helen hesitated, then admitted, coffee would be appreciated. The cafeteria on the second floor is surprisingly decent. This small request, Helen actually expressing a need rather than maintaining perfect self-sufficiency, represented its own kind of progress in our relationship. I nodded and stood. I'll get coffee for everyone. James, come find me if there's any news before I return. The hospital. Cafeteria was relatively quiet for a Saturday morning. As I waited for the barista to prepare Helen's precise coffee order, non-fat latte, extra hot, light foam, I found myself reflecting on how differently this medical situation felt compared to William's first hospitalization. Then I had been an outsider to the Parker family crisis, included out of obligation rather than genuine desire for my presence. Now, I moved within the family system with greater ease, able to provide support that was actually accepted rather than politely deflected. "Sarah, I thought that was you." I turned to find Dr. Harrington, the Children's Hospital Technology Committee chair who had been so interested in my work during Helen's dinner party. "Dr. Harrington, hello. Are you working today?" "Consulting on a difficult case," he explained. "What brings you here? Nothing serious, I hope." "My father-in-law is having some cardiac tests. Precautionary, we believe, but concerning given his history." He nodded sympathetically. "Cardiac issues often involve ongoing management. William is in excellent hands with Dr. Levine, though. That's reassuring to hear." "While I have you," he continued, "has Helen mentioned the board position? We're quite serious about wanting your technology expertise as we implement the new cardiac wing." "She has, yes. I'm meeting with Chairwoman Bridges next week to discuss the role in more detail before making a decision." "Excellent," he smiled. "Between your professional background and the Parker family connection, you bring a valuable perspective to our planning. The monitoring systems your team developed are exactly the kind of innovation we need to be implementing more broadly." This straightforward acknowledgement of my professional value, without reference to my marriage or financial status, was refreshingly direct. Dr. Harrington had consistently engaged with me as a healthcare technology expert first, Parker family member second, a distinction I appreciated. "I'm looking forward to the discussion," I told him sincerely. "The Children's Hospital's mission aligns well with my professional interests." After collecting the coffee order and exchanging farewells with Dr. Harrington, I returned to the death's cardiac unit where I found James and Helen in conversation with a doctor I recognized as Dr. Levine, William's cardiologist. "The angiogram shows a new partial blockage," he was explaining as I approached. "Not severe enough to have caused a major heart attack, but definitely concerning given Mr. Parker's history. I'm recommending a stent procedure to address this blockage before it becomes more problematic." "Is that a surgical procedure?" Helen asked, accepting the coffee I handed her with a distracted nod of thanks. "Minimally invasive," Dr. Levine assured her. "We access the artery through a small incision, typically in the wrist or groin, and guide the stent into place. It's routinely performed as a same-day procedure, though given Mr. Parker's history, I'd recommend overnight observation afterward." "And the recovery period?" James inquired, clearly thinking about business implications. "Typically brief for the procedure itself, a few days of limited activity. However," the doctor's expression became more serious, "this second cardiac event indicates that Mr. Parker's heart disease is progressive despite medication and lifestyle changes. We need to discuss more aggressive management strategies moving forward." Helen's composure wavered slightly at this assessment. "What exactly does that mean, doctor?" "It means we need to reevaluate his workload, stress levels, and treatment plan. Mr. Parker has been, shall we say, a reluctant patient at times. This episode demonstrates that partial compliance with recommendations isn't sufficient." The diplomatic phrasing didn't disguise the message. William needed to take his condition more seriously and make more substantive lifestyle changes. The implications for Parker Industries, and for James's role within it, were significant. "Can we see him before the procedure?" Helen asked. "Briefly. We're preparing him now and will perform the stent placement within the hour. He's in room 324. As Dr. Levine departed, Helen turned to James with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "This changes things, doesn't it? William can't continue pretending he can maintain his previous involvement at the company." "No, he can't," James agreed quietly. We'll need to accelerate the transition plans we've started. The board will have to be informed of the increased health concerns. He won't like that, Helen observed. His preferences aren't the priority right now, James replied with gentle firmness. His health is. This exchange, Helen acknowledging reality rather than maintaining appearances, James asserting leadership without apology, demonstrated how profoundly the family dynamic had evolved since William's first heart attack. Helen was no longer automatically defending William's position, and James was no longer deferring to his father's preferences when they conflicted with necessary decisions. Let's see him, Helen suggested, gathering herself. He should hear from both of us that these changes are necessary and supported. She glanced at me, seemingly uncertain whether the both of us included me in this family moment. I'll wait. Here, I offered, recognizing their need for privacy. Take your time. James squeezed my hand gratefully before following his mother toward William's room. Left alone in the waiting area, I found my thoughts turning to the conversation James and I had begun that morning about starting a family. The timing seemed almost cosmically ironic. Just as we contemplated creating new life, we were confronted with the fragility of existing life. William's recurring heart problems served as a stark reminder that time was finite, plans were vulnerable to biological realities, and priorities needed regular reassessment. His reluctance to fully acknowledge his limitations had potentially accelerated his health decline. Would we make similar mistakes in our own life planning? These philosophical musings were interrupted by Claire's arrival with her husband Robert, both looking concerned but composed. "Sarah," Claire greeted me with unexpected warmth. "How is he?" Mom's message was typically sparse on details. I explained. The situation as Dr. Levine had described it, the partial blockage, the planned stent procedure, the implications for William's ongoing health management. Claire listened attentively, asking clarifying questions that revealed genuine medical knowledge I hadn't realized she possessed. "I did 2 years of nursing school before switching to art history," she explained, noticing my surprise. "Not quite the Parker-approved career path, but it comes in handy at moments like this." This casual revelation reshaped my understanding of Claire, suggesting layers beneath her seemingly perfect adherence to Parker family expectations. Perhaps her recent interest in my career path wasn't merely social opportunism, but genuine curiosity about roads not taken. "James and your mother are with him now," I concluded. "The procedure itself should be relatively straightforward, according to the doctor." "But the implications aren't," Claire observed astutely. "Dad can't continue as he has been, can he?" "No," I confirmed. The doctor was quite clear that more significant changes will be necessary. Claire exchanged glances with her husband. "That's going to be difficult for everyone, especially Dad. His identity is so wrapped up in Parker Industries." "James has been implementing structural changes that should help," I offered, "creating a management team less dependent on any single person, including your father." "Yes, I've heard about his modernization efforts," Claire replied with a hint of amusement. "Dad calls it unnecessary corporate bureaucracy, but even he has to admit the company is running more efficiently." This conversation, Claire and I discussing Parker Industries' management structure as equals, without the usual undercurrent of her evaluating my worthiness to participate in family matters, represented yet another shift in our dynamic. My business success and James's leadership evolution had created space for more authentic interactions, less constrained by traditional Parker family hierarchies. As we continued talking, waiting for news about William's procedure, I found myself surprisingly comfortable in this family crisis moment. No longer the outsider tentatively navigating Parker family politics, I had somehow become a legitimate participant in the family system, still maintaining my distinct identity, but no longer fighting for basic recognition. The journey from being dismissed as a gold digger to being accepted as a valued family member with legitimate contributions had been neither linear nor complete. Helen still occasionally slipped into old patterns of judgment. William still struggled to fully acknowledge non-traditional forms of success, and Claire's newfound respect remained somewhat contingent on my continued professional achievement. Yet undeniable progress had occurred, catalyzed by the $30 million acquisition that had forced a fundamental reassessment of who I was and what I contributed to the Parker family ecosystem. Money had opened the door to recognition, but what had ultimately changed the dynamic was the confident identity I'd established beyond the Parker shadow, an identity powerful enough to stand on its own terms rather than needing their validation. As James eventually returned from visiting his father, his expression reflective but resolved, I realized that our morning conversation about starting a family now existed within a larger context of generational transition. William's health challenges were accelerating a leadership succession that paralleled our potential transition to parenthood, endings and beginnings intertwined in the complex tapestry of family evolution. Whatever came next, for William's health, for Parker Industries' leadership, for our potential journey toward parenthood, would build upon these transformed relationships and recalibrated expectations. The foundation had shifted from rigid tradition to cautious adaptation, creating space for new possibilities that honored the past without being constrained by it. The family that had once dismissed me as a gold digger at dinner was gradually becoming a family that recognized different forms of value, different paths to contribution, and different expressions of the Parker legacy. The transformation remained, imperfect and incomplete, but the direction was clear, toward greater authenticity, broader definitions of success, and more room for individual paths within the collective identity. As James reached for my hand, silently seeking connection, amid family uncertainty, I squeezed back with quiet assurance. We were navigating this evolving landscape together, partners in creating something new from the complicated inheritance of expectations, achievements, and possibilities that defined the ongoing story of our shared life. 1 year after William's stent procedure, I stood in the nursery of our new lakeside home, gently rocking our 2-month-old daughter Emma as the morning sun cast patterns across the pale yellow walls. The monitor on my wrist, a special edition of the technology I'd created, tracked her vital signs silently, data flowing to my phone where both James and I could view it. My own invention now protected the most precious creation in my life. "There you are," James said softly, appearing in the doorway. "Dad and Mom just pulled up." "Should I tell them to wait?" "No, she's almost asleep. They can come up in a few minutes." The Parkers' weekly visits to see their granddaughter had become a cherished routine. William, fully retired now and looking healthier than he had in years, had discovered unexpected joy in grandparenthood. Helen, initially awkward with the practical aspects of baby care, had gradually found her own way to connect with Emma through singing lullabies and reading stories, revealing a gentle side I'd never witnessed before. The journey to this moment had been transformative for everyone. After William's second cardiac event, the necessary changes had accelerated. James had assumed full leadership of Parker Industries, implementing the modernization initiatives he'd begun while maintaining the core values that had made the company successful. William had reluctantly but ultimately gracefully transitioned to an advisory role, focusing his energy on the Children's Hospital project and, eventually, on preparing for Emma's arrival. When we'd announced my pregnancy, 8 months after that fateful morning conversation interrupted by William's hospitalization, Helen had indeed immediately begun planning the nursery. But rather than imposing her vision as she might have done previously, she'd asked thoughtful questions about our preferences and offered suggestions rather than directives. This evolution in her approach, from control to collaboration, mirrored broader changes in our family dynamic. My own transition to motherhood had come with unexpected challenges and joys. Balancing my VP role at Medicorp with pregnancy and now early parenthood required constant adaptation. I'd negotiated a flexible arrangement, 3 days in the office, 2 working remotely, that allowed me to maintain my leadership position while being present for Emma's early development. The board position at Madison Children's Hospital had proven unexpectedly fulfilling, connecting my technical expertise with tangible impact on pediatric care. The Parker Family Wing for Pediatric Cardiology had opened 3 months ago, featuring monitoring systems evolved from my original designs. Seeing my technology helping children with cardiac conditions brought a deeper meaning to my professional achievements than the acquisition price ever had. As Emma finally drifted to sleep in my arms, I gently placed her in the crib and activated the monitoring system, another evolution of my original technology, now marketed as Medicorp's Premium Baby Monitor. The journey from being dismissed as a gold digger to creating technology that protected my own child represented a circle completed in the most meaningful way possible. Downstairs, I found William and Helen in the living room with James, Helen arranging freshly baked muffins on a plate while William proudly displayed the tiny Parker Industries branded onesie he'd had custom made. "Is she asleep?" Helen asked as I joined them. "Just nodded off," I confirmed. "We can peek in on her in a little while." William handed me a coffee prepared exactly as I preferred it, a small gesture that represented how thoroughly he'd revised his understanding of my place in the family. No longer the inconvenient career woman distracting his son, I was now Sarah, business leader, board member, mother of his granddaughter, and legitimate contributor to the Parker legacy in my own unique way. "The quarterly numbers look excellent," he mentioned casually. James told me about the expansion into European markets. Impressive strategic move. This acknowledgement of my professional achievements alongside family matters, rather than in opposition to them, encapsulated how far we'd come. The family that had once dismissed me as a gold digger now celebrated both my personal and professional contributions, recognizing that success could take many forms and that the Parker legacy was enriched rather than diminished by embracing diverse paths to achievement. As we settled into comfortable conversation, I caught James's eye across the room and shared a smile of quiet understanding. We had built something neither of us could have fully imagined that night his family had unknowingly insulted the woman who'd just sold her company for $30 million. A family defined not by rigid traditions or financial metrics, but by mutual respect, evolving understanding, and the courage to create our own unique legacy. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out.